actually 2020 gave me time to step back. It put the brakes on me, which is always a healthy thing for somebody like me. I'll just go. So someone else kind of needs, or something else needs to put the brakes on. And that's what 2020 did for me. So it just kind of forced me to pause. And during that time, I just got naturally, again, we're all at home and we weren't out and about as much. So I very naturally just listened to more and more podcasts. And I think that was probably when I did get really into Diary of a CEO and I listened to every new episode. And so I was just like, I could do this. I would love to do this. And it's funny you mentioning some of those other shows, like Diary of a CEO, High Performance Podcasts, all of those other shows, because I then did a little bit more research and there was this really annoying discovery. You saying that millennial entrepreneur, for you've got more of kind of the age niche, which makes perfect sense because we've been born into a different era. It's more relatable. I totally get that. It makes perfect sense. What I noticed when I was looking at the business podcast landscape is that you have these shows like Diary of a CEO, My First Million, High Performance Podcast, the Gary V audio experience, blah, 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 blah. And they all happen to be hosted by guys, right? Mm-hmm. And then as soon as you start to look at female hosted shows, they're gendered. So for example, whether it's the name, the artwork, or both, they're called things like CEO, Girls Tech Charge, To All My Sisters,
Women in Web3.
Women in Web3, like suddenly, or the artwork is pinkish or lilac or whatever. And, I'm not ashamed of being a woman or anything at all, but I do have very strong views on gender equality and feminism, which we won't talk about today. But for me, it's too reductionist. I don't want to be reduced down to my gender. And so that was a really big ambition of mine, and still is with the show. I want it to be successful in its own right, that just so happens to be hosted by a woman. So that's where like the name, the title, Strategy and Tragedy has got nothing to do with women. It's not gendered. The artwork is black and white. So I want to be operating, and this is kind of my approach in business as well. I want to be operating on that side of the playing field and being taken seriously in that meritocratic way. It's very nuanced, because it's like, well, you kind of have to work harder as a woman and all the rest of it. But like, I just don't. And with my guests, the last thing I'll just very quickly share is that diversity has followed through in the guests on the show. And I hope listeners have hopefully realized this, is I interview Black men, brown women, white women, Black, like all ages, races, genders, but without making that a thing either. Like I won't be like, oh, here's my next female founder guest or my new Black guest. Like it's just they're on the show for who they are. But behind the scenes, I'm still prioritizing as much as I can, hopefully, the diversity.
But I guess you don't ask them specific questions that are like they're about their gender, about their race, about anything like that?
Sometimes it does. Yeah. So for example, Emmy Faust, which happens to be my most popular podcast episode, so I want to ask you what yours is in a second as well, but she's amazing, but surprisingly that's been the most popular episode, and her business is called Female Founders Rise, and her angel investment thesis is purely to back women. So naturally, there is more of a conversation with the gender piece is then kind of pushed up in the agenda. And then there have been others that's more about, the challenges that they've maybe faced as a minority. So it's also, it is a very tricky subject, because you also don't want to like fully ignore those factors, because they are real challenges or privileges. That's the other thing that I'll also say. On the flip side, I also ask the upper class, well-educated white men on my show if they're aware of the privileges that have helped set them up for success, which can be a bit of an uncomfortable like conversation. So it goes both ways.
Yeah, my sort of thought process on this, it was like, well, if I want to inspire the next generation, I have to get sort of every branch of what an entrepreneur looks like. Yeah. Right? And like, but that's my thought process was that going into it. And so I did make a conscious effort of representing sort of everyone and any sort of shape or form an entrepreneur can take. But honestly, like just from my experience going forward, I haven't had to try that hard. Like genuinely, I haven't had to try hard at all. I've had people come to me, you know, Black founders, female founders of color. Like I've had pretty much every shade. And like honestly, my audience as well. If you look at the data, the only like I think gender data you can get really that makes sense is probably Instagram, because YouTube, some people just don't reveal their gender on YouTube, and so it's not as the data's not as good. But anyway. And so if you look at my Instagram, it's like pretty much 50-50. If anything, I think women might have 5% more than men that follow my Instagram page, which
that makes sense.
And like, and honestly, like guest wise, it's pretty much 50-50 as well. But genuinely, I've not tried to make it like that. It's just the way it's happened. It's
kind
the
of
filter that's come
for
through.
me. I don't know if I should admit that because I don't know what it means or what it says about, I don't know, like my network, but I actually have to make a conscious effort. I do get one particular demographic profile. I'm spoiled for choice, and I do sometimes have to like purposely go out and find other profiles. So it's interesting. So most popular episode of yours?
My two most popular episodes are both women.
So interesting. Funny with mine as well. Is that coincidence?
So I don't know. I've never really thought about it, but yeah. So my first most popular episode is with a friend of mine, Laura Costa, who's I've been friends with her for a long time.
She's got a huge following.
Yeah, she's like really blown up recently. Yeah. And she works incredibly hard. Like I've been friends with her for a long time, and like she's been working very hard to gain this following. Like it's definitely not out the blue. Like she's been working very hard behind the scenes. And the second one, I believe right now is Maya Richora, who
I knew you'd say her. I knew it.
Yeah,
if you'd asked me to guess, I would have said
everyone
Maya.
Everyone knows Maya these days. She's cool because Maya and I went to university together.